This is VikesNow, and I'm Dustin Baker. We're winding down the week. This is the August 11th edition with the Vikings and Raiders on tap to play in the preseason, the first preseason game of 2022 for Kevin O'Connell's Vikings. Yesterday, we had a quasi-live air show because I didn't know 10 minutes before we recorded with Josh Fry that the Vikings depth chart had been released, and usually I would see that immediately. Alas, I did not, so hopefully you got to enjoy the live reactions. I know I did. I've never done anything quite like that, at least on this show. What a loser, right? Get vamped for the stuff like that. Anyhow, now the depth chart is in the rear view a little bit, but it's important because it gives a pecking order of where all these dudes you've studied and read about and thought about for, my goodness, 4 or 5 months, what the lay of the land looks like. Now, strategically, the team was pretty vanilla about its categorization. So it wasn't a traditional, WR3 is so-and-so. They used semicolons. They used the word or all throughout the depth chart to leave purposeful ambiguity, so that, it's not just a straightforward black and white like we would like. So you have to kind of tunnel through what some of it means. I think anytime they use the word or, that meant that player A and player B were on even foot. I get it. Competition, it's inspirational that way. But they had clear tiers in a lot of the roster, which were separated by those semicolons. So on this show, we're going to go through the wide receivers because in Minnesota lore and history, receivers are probably the most popular position on the team because they've never settled the quarterback position since Fran Tarkenton, excuse me. All right, so let's talk about these wide receivers 1 through 12, evidently, and there's a bunch of them. The most meaningless part of this depth chart release is that Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen were 1 and 2. You knew that. Bada bing, it happened. It was a formality. Nothing's changing there. Those two, number one with a bullet, are the WR1, the WR2. Jefferson usurped Thielen arguably in week 4 of his rookie season, and now Thielen's just this touchdown machine, this red zone target that has taken off in the end zone and red zone since Kyle Rudolph left the team. So those were not surprising one bit, but after that, it gets a little okay. The confirmation that KJ Osborne is evidently is the WR3 because why wouldn't he be? He was the best WR3 the Vikings have seen probably in a decade, although I know Jarius Wright lives in your hearts in a special spot, Mr. Third Down. But Osborne has really solved the WR3 problem, at least for a year, and he did so really in a sneaky way. And like last year at this time at training camp, he was looking good. But then you start to ask yourself, does this translate into regular season? Does he get a roster spot? Is he WR3? And yes, emphatically, he's the team's WR3 unless Amir Smith-Marset somehow surpasses him in year 2. So I believe that the way the roster shakes out, that you would have Jefferson, Thielen, Osborne. We knew it. Now is when the puzzle comes together, or at least solidifies a little bit per an unofficial depth chart. It's Amir Smith-Marset. At WR4, there were whispers throughout the Vikings community. I think it was Paul Allen, Pete Bursich, separately a couple months ago, said look out for Jalen Naylor. This dude has what it takes to be WR3. That could still be the case, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the way it is in the preseason and probably to start the regular season. We'll get to Naylor in a minute, but he is nowhere near WR3, at least per the way the Vikings describe the depth chart, in a Wednesday afternoon article on their website. But Amir Smith-Marset, who might get a little special teams action as well, he should have an ample opportunity on a Kevin O'Connell-infused team that will use more WR4s than Zimmer ever used. So in that vein, Osborne and Smith-Marset, not necessarily interchangeable, but you should expect big things from the WR4 in this offense no matter who it is. You're just so used to it being nothingness after the first two guys because it was always a sandwich of B.C. Johnson, Chad Beebe, Laquan Treadwell, and Vikings were like the one team on the planet that couldn't have a WR3. Now those days are over thanks to Osborne, and the WR4 trend could be on the way because that's what the Rams did. And the team would probably be remiss not to utilize it because it worked out pretty well for the Rams. After Smith Marset at WR4 is BC Johnson. Now, this was important for him to get into this next tier because I didn't have him on my 53-man roster prediction. I had him as an easy cut simply because I don't think he's very dynamic. You've probably heard that from my voice. How many times? I've been doing this for about 5 months together. I've never been a big BC Johnson dude, not because he sucks. I just don't think he's overly dynamic, not super fast. He's, to me, just a guy. Now, he could come back from this injury with a vengeance and prove me wrong. I hope he does. But right now, in the Vikings pecking order, he's either a WR5 or WR6. After that, probably, in my opinion, because it's the wide receiver position and because it's so unsung, Myron Mitchell was listed WR6. I reacted yesterday that I wouldn't have seen this one coming. If you would have said, look, homie, come up with the pecking order of 12 wide receivers because the Vikings are releasing a depth chart today, I would have had Mitchell down 8, 9, 10 and not thought anything of it. I know he's had a good camp, but a lot of dudes have good camps. But this Mitchell stuff seems to be where the rubber hits the road. They put him in the third tier of wide receivers on the first depth chart. So there is a realistic possibility if his preseason, Mitchell that is fruitful, he's going to make this damn team. And last year, he did not. He was on the practice squad, although he did come and play Week 15 against the Bears for a single offensive snap. But arguably the biggest news for guys and gals like you and me that get into this stuff way too hardcore is that Myron Mitchell is on tap to make the team if you can take this first depth chart seriously. After that, a little interesting as well, Tristan Jackson, kind of in that Myron Mitchell mold as a practice squatter. He's WR7, and this is probably where the cutoff is for players not to make it. I don't know if they would keep 8 wide receivers. I think 7 would be a stretch. But evidently in this the OR category, the Tier 4, they have Tristan Jackson, Jalen Naylor, and Dan Chisena. And Jackson was listed first when they typed it out. And I tried to look at this to way too many angles to figure out, is it alphabetical after they do the semicolons? What does the word OR mean? You know, almost like an attorney. But regardless, Tristan Jackson has the OR next to it with Jalen Naylor and Dan Chisena. Now, Jalen Naylor, I guess, tentatively listed anywhere between a WR7 and WR9 on the first depth chart. That is surprising because he's supposed to be, according to him, the fastest player on the team, going to be slugging it out for punt returning duty. And then you look at the roster and you're like, well, this son of a gun isn't even sniffing the top 7 wide receivers. So he's got some work to do. I don't think he would be a roster cut. He seems way too exciting, dynamic, confident to not be with this team at all. But he's interesting to keep an eye on because he should have been in this Myron Mitchell role of about WR5, WR6. Nope. He's all the way down at WR8. Now, he can also have a built-in advantage to make the team with punt returns because he, unlike Albert Wilson, or unlike, who else was on there? I can't remember who was subtracted from the punt returning duties, but Jalen Naylor on this show and Believe in Vikings, my podcast with McKinney, he said that he's going to win that damn job. He's going to be the punt returner, and he'll be in the mix this training camp, the rest of it, and the preseason. But on the whole, he should have been higher based on the hype surrounding, his big senior year at Michigan State and the fact that he's new. WR9 with their groupings is Dan Chisena. He's the one guy that I kept on my 53-man projection because I think that they'll keep him for special teams. Now, when you see a roster like this come out, you're like, all right, I was wrong. I'm going to have to go back and reevaluate everything that I know. But Chisena is a contributor as a gunner on special teams, so I thought that would give him an incumbent advantage to make the 53-man roster. At WR9 on this damn thing, who knows? After that, this one, Albert Wilson, evidently, he's in that Tier 4 category. If you believe in the order in which they typed out the names, he would be the WR10. And he was signed at the end of May when the negotiations with D.D. Westbrook evidently broke off. He was supposed to be the D.D. Westbrook, and folks were like, oh, yeah, he returned punts and kicks in college. He can do it here. Nope, he's not listed anywhere near that depth chart, and he's buried on the wide receiver depth chart. So I believe if this roster holds somewhat true, that he's not going to be a part of the team. And I think way back when you start looking at his roles on past teams, WR3s, WR4s with the Chiefs and the Dolphins, he seemed like he would be way way up high on this roster, perhaps competing for WR4, WR5. But in the early shakedown, unless I've got this tiering system all wrong, he's down towards the bottom. And then the last two, for better or worse, are footnotes. Thomas Hennigan, I still don't know much about him, and Blake Prohl, who's on here but is on the PUP list. And sad to say, neither one of those dudes will make the team, in my opinion. But out of these 12 that I listed, it would be a stretch to have 7. So you should get your hearts prepared for a lot of wide receivers being cut by the end of the month, and cuts start, I believe, Tuesday of next week when they trim it down by 5 guys, and the week after that, 5 more, and then the whole tamale on August 30th. So, in order, if you want to subscribe to this method, just the brute force listing of names that the Vikings did, is Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, BC Johnson, Myron Mitchell, Tristan Jackson, Jalen Naylor, Dan Chisena, Albert Wilson, way the hell down at the bottom, Thomas Hennigan, and Blake Prohl. That's what we got for the WR section of the depth chart, and probably take on a different aspect of it tomorrow. We shall see. But that's all we got for Thursday, and Skol, baby.